So good afternoon, very good afternoon to everybody, all the students and all my colleagues and all the respected teachers who are attending this lecture. The aim of this lecture will be discussing on the commonly occurring acyanotic congenital heart disease. How should we approach when we are sitting in our OPD based on our small clinical skills without doing echocardiography. So I welcome all of them. So we will start with a case scenario wherein we have a 2-month-old baby who is born by a normal vaginal delivery and was admitted with a complaint of breathing difficulty and not taking feed. His birth events were normal, but on examination, the patient had baseline tachycardia, heart rate is 180, which is not normal for a 2-month-old child. Respiratory rate is 68 per minute, and there is subcostal retraction. There is no clinical cyanosis. The pulse volume is good. The precordium is hyperdynamic. Loud second sound P2. The mid diastolic murmur is there. A systolic murmur is also there. And the child was sick. So the child was admitted and the treatment was started. ABCs were managed, oxygen was started, IV fluids was started, and the X-ray was done. What we can see on the X-ray is a huge cardiomegaly with congested lung fields and possible lower respiratory tract infection. We are not sure. So what are we basically dealing with? We are dealing with a symptomatic child presenting at 2 months of age who has a murmur and there is no cyanosis. So we have a clue in the form of murmur, no cyanosis, and there is baseline tachycardia, tachypnea, hyperdynamic precordium, mid-diastolic murmur at the apex, and the chest X-ray showing cardiomegaly with pulmonary plethora. So this subset of symptoms are basically features of increased pulmonary blood flow. So we are dealing with a condition which is cardiac condition because there is a murmur, and this cardiac condition is presenting at 2 months of age, which means that this cardiac condition is more likely to be a congenital one and not the acquired one. As there is no cyanosis, it is more likely an acyanotic heart disease. And since this group of symptoms, tachycardia, tachypnea, hyperdynamic precordium, cardiomegaly, plethora, these all are features of increased pulmonary blood flow. So this increased pulmonary blood flow occurs in acyanotic heart disease, namely left to right shunt. So our clinical diagnosis is acyanotic congenital heart disease with left to right shunt. So when we talk about left to right shunt, the 3 commonly occurring left to right shunt we all know are atrial septal defect, ventricular septal defect, and patent ductus arteriosus. What I have mentioned is more likely VSD. Why I have written VSD? We all know that atrial septal defect is not likely to present at 2 months of age. It's a low pressure shunt between the left atrium and the right atrium, and hence this atrial septal defect is not going to present at 2 months of age. And PDA is going to have a continuous murmur and not the systolic murmur. So the more likely diagnosis in this particular case would be VSD. This VSD diagnosis is our clinical diagnosis. Echo can have anything else also. So we are not worried about it. But looking at the clinical scenario where we have a 2-month-old sick child, acyanotic child, where we have features of increased pulmonary blood flow, left to right shunt is the common etiology, and among that VSD is the most likely diagnosis because it's the commonest of all. So echo turned out to be a large VSD, severe PAH, and good biventricular function. Now we will have a similar one more scenario where we have a 3-year-old boy thriving well, asymptomatic, no major admissions in childhood, and murmur was detected in school health checkup. This is a common scenario which we face. And the parents come to us that in the school they have told that the child is having possibility of heart disease. So we examined the child, and child had grade 3 systolic murmur in fourth left parasternal space. There is no cyanosis. There are no clinical features of increased pulmonary blood flow. Chest X-ray was normal. ECG was also normal. And this is a chest X-ray. What we can see over here is there is no cardiomegaly, there is no plethora, and a normal chest X-ray, which goes more in favor of a physiological murmur. So your presumptive diagnosis is the murmur is more likely to be physiological, which we can confirm after doing echocardiography. Now coming to some general information about the congenital heart disease. If we talk at the Indian scenario, we have incidence of congenital heart disease at 10 per 1,000 live birth, and for a population rate of birth rate of 27 per 1,000 population year, considering our population of India, every year 2 lakhs, more than 2 lakh children are born in our country with congenital heart disease. And if we talk only of our Surat and its draining area, for a population of around 1 crore, more than 2,500 children are born every year with congenital heart disease. Of these kids, around 30 to 40% are critical cardiac lesions which need treatment in first year of life. If you don't treat these children in first year of life, then they are going to die. And hence, congenital heart disease accounts for 10 to 15% of infant mortality rate. That is the third commonest cause after prematurity and sepsis. With recently available treatment modalities, if the congenital heart disease is diagnosed timely and treatment is provided timely, more than 80% of the infants born can survive and live normal life. But this is not the scenario in our country because of the lack of infrastructure and understanding about the heart disease. Traditionally, the congenital heart disease is classified as acyanotic heart disease and cyanotic heart disease. Among the acyanotic heart disease, further classified based on pulmonary blood flow, whether the pulmonary blood flow is increased, normal, or decreased. Further classification is divided as left to right shunt and obstructive lesions. We will focus only on the above category in today's lecture, where we will be discussing on how you will be able to reach the diagnosis of acyanotic heart disease, particularly in terms of each and every lesion which I mentioned in the table. So among the left to right shunt, the commonly occurring lesions are ASD, VSD, PDA. ASD is atrial septal defect, ventricular septal defect, patent ductus arteriosus, AP window, aorta pulmonary window, and atrioventricular septal defect, that is the endocardial cushion defect. Among the obstructive lesions, where the pulmonary blood flow is going to be normal, we have aortic stenosis, pulmonary stenosis, coarctation of aorta are the commonly occurring obstructive lesions where we don't have cyanosis. So coming to the anatomy of the heart, I have taken few slides because we have residents also in the meeting. So the heart consists of 4 chambers, the 2 upper and the 2 lower. The right atrium receives the deoxygenated blood from the superior vena cava and the inferior vena cava, and the blood is poured into the right ventricle, and this deoxygenated blood goes into the pulmonary artery, into the lungs, where the blood gets saturated, oxygenated, and this oxygenated blood returns back to the left atrium through 4 pulmonary veins, 2 on the right side and 2 on the left side. And from the left atrium, this oxygenated blood is ejected via left ventricle through aorta into the whole of the body, which is the normal circulation of the human body. Now coming to the atrial septal defect, as the name suggests, it is a defect in the interatrial septum. Because of the defect in the interatrial septum and the LA pressure is 3, the RA pressure is 3, the flow across the defect is dependent upon the systemic vascular resistance and the pulmonary vascular resistance ratio. We all know that pulmonary vascular resistance is less than the systemic vascular resistance, and hence the blood will flow from left atrium to the right atrium. Apart from the deoxygenated blood which comes into the right atrium, the oxygenated blood from the left atrium will also come into the right side of the heart, and hence large amount of blood is reaching to the right side of the heart. And this large amount of the blood, can everybody see the arrow also which I am showing?
Yes, we can see.
Okay. So this large amount of the blood coming to the right side of the heart in case of ASD will lead to dilatation of the right side of the heart. And this large amount of blood will go into the lungs, and when it reaches back into the left atrium, that extra amount of blood will again come onto the right side, and only the normal cardiac output blood is going to go to the left side, as a result of which the left ventricle will not dilate. There will be dilatation of the right side of the heart. The right atrium and the right ventricle will dilate. So any shunt which is above the level of the tricuspid valve, either ASD or a PAPVC or any other anomalous channel opening into the SPC or the right atrium, it will cause right heart dilatation. Now coming to the ventricular septal defect. In case of ventricular septal defect, as the name suggests, it is a defect in the interventricular septum. The deoxygenated blood from the superior vena cava and the inferior vena cava via RA, RV goes into the lungs. At the same time, this oxygenated blood from the left ventricle also goes into the right ventricle into the lung. As we all know, the LV pressure is more than the RV pressure, hence the blood has to flow left to right. That is why left to right shunt. So this blood will go into the lungs, and large amount of blood going into the lungs will reach the left atrium and hence into the left ventricle, and hence the left side of the heart will get dilated. Similarly, in patients with patent ductus arteriosus, the large amount of the blood goes into the pulmonary artery along with the routine cardiac output from the right side of the heart, and hence the left side of the heart will get dilated in patients with patent ductus arteriosus. Similarly, in case of AP window is another entity which is similar to the PDA, where there is a communication between the main pulmonary artery and the ascending aorta. There is a defect over here, as a result of which it will behave similar to the patent ductus arteriosus. Now coming to the obstructive lesion, among the obstructive lesion, we have pulmonary valve stenosis, aortic valve stenosis, and coarctation of aorta as a very common scenario. In this particular case, there is stenosis at the level of pulmonary valve. So there is difficulty for the right ventricle to inject the blood into the pulmonary artery across the pulmonary valve because of the stenosis. So the right ventricle has to pump hard, has to work more, as a result of which the right ventricle hypertrophy will occur over a period of time. So depending upon the severity of stenosis, the degree of hypertrophy will be accordingly. More the stenosis, more will be the right ventricular hypertrophy. Less the stenosis left, the heart has to work, so less will be the hypertrophy. And sometimes when there is very mild pulmonary stenosis, there will be no left ventricular hypertrophy. So depending upon the severity, the hypertrophy will be there. Similarly, on the aortic valve side, the aortic valve is a tricuspid valve. It opens up fully. Sometimes it is bicuspid and stenotic, as a result of which there is stenosis of the aortic valve, and depending upon the severity of the aortic valve stenosis, the left ventricular hypertrophy can be accordingly. Now, what is coarctation of aorta? Something in the aorta. Coarctation means narrowing, and narrowing at the level of transverse arch and the descending aorta is called coarctation of aorta. And depending upon the severity of the narrowing of the aorta, this disease can manifest as early as a neonatal age group or can present even late in the adulthood or even in the adolescent age. So it all depends upon what is the severity of the narrowing of the lumen. It will present similar like aortic stenosis in the form of left ventricular hypertrophy. So now coming to the evaluation of the child, how are we going to come to a particular diagnosis when we see a child having a heart disease? So when should one suspect a heart disease in children? If it's a suspected to have heart disease, whether it's a congenital one, if it is a congenital, what is the type of lesion and what is the severity of the lesion? We will go through all the question answers. One should suspect a heart disease in children if the child is having repeated lower respiratory tract infection. The lower respiratory tract infection, repeated or a recurrent lower respiratory infection, is defined as 2 episodes of admission at a 6 months interval or 3 episodes of admission for lower respiratory tract infection in any time frame with clear radiological clearance of chest X-ray. This definition is very important for our students because this is asked in the exam and students usually forget to speak radiological clearance. So that is very important. Failure to thrive. The mother says that despite feeding well on mother's milk or on the top milk, the child is not gaining weight. So when the child is not gaining weight despite adequate diet, then it is considered to be failure to thrive and one should think of heart disease. Suck, rest, suck cycle. What is suck, rest, suck cycle? Suck, rest, suck cycle is basically normally when a child feeds, starts feeding, starts sucking, it keeps on sucking continuously till the end. But in patients with congenital heart disease, where the heart is utilizing large amount of energy for its cardiac output, the child sucks for 2 minutes, then again take rest for 2 to 5 minutes, then again sucks for 2 minutes, and this suck, rest, sucks keep on continuing. If we talk of infants who are on breast milk, the activity of sucking is the only activity of a newborn baby which utilizes the maximum number of energy. The maximum BMR is utilized when a baby sucks. The sucking consumes large amount of energy, and if the child is having any disease which is also utilizing large amount of energy, then the child feels hypoxia intermittently, and because of that intermittent hypoxia, child has to take rest, and that is the reason or the mechanism for suck, rest, suck cycle. Baseline tachycardia, tachypnea, irritability, excessive sweating, hepatomegaly would be the isolated feature. Sometimes only tachycardia could be the isolated feature of congestive cardiac failure. Not all the kids will have edema, abdominal distension and swelling with heart failure in smaller kids. So when you have breathlessness, cyanosis, cyanotic spell, convulsion, even convulsion sometimes can be a possible symptom of a heart disease. Severe hypoxia can cause convulsion and arrhythmias can cause sudden death. So when you have any of these symptoms, one should suspect a heart disease. Coming to the signs, which is very characteristic, the signs what we classify as NADA's criteria, presence of one major or 2 minor criteria, one should always evaluate the child for heart disease. Major criteria includes grade 3 or more systolic murmur, any degree of diastolic murmur, cyanosis, and clinical features of congestive heart failure. Minor criteria includes less than grade 3 systolic murmur, abnormal second heart sound, abnormal ECG, abnormal chest X-ray or blood pressure. When these NADA's criteria are fulfilled, one should always rule out heart disease. So whether it's a congenital one or not, or it's an acquired one. If the symptoms are present from the early childhood, if there is a murmur, abnormal chest X-ray, ECG at birth, presence of central cyanosis, presence of other extracardiac abnormalities, presence of underlying syndrome. One should consider the possibility of heart disease to be congenital in nature. The specific features pertaining to pertinent heart disease is more theoretical one. Moon-like faces is seen in pulmonary stenosis. Polydactyly, fingerized thumb is seen in patients with Holt-Oram syndrome, which is common with ASD. Elfin faces, Williams syndrome. This baby is a Williams syndrome baby, where supravalvular aortic stenosis and peripheral pulmonary artery stenosis is common. Turner syndrome, coarctation is common. Down syndrome, complete AV canal defect or the endocardial cushion defect is the commonest. In Noonan syndrome, Holt-Oram syndrome, ASD is common. Rubella, PDA is common. In Marfan syndrome, aortic regurgitation, mitral valve prolapse are commonly seen because of the connective tissue disease. So once you confirm or you suspect that based on the possibility it is a congenital one, so what is the type of lesion? Whether it's a acyanotic or cyanotic. Of course, we can see that it is an acyanotic heart disease. But if there is a borderline saturation, where the saturation is between 95 to 85, we will not be able to diagnose that this particular disease is a cyanotic heart disease, because we will be able to recognize clinical cyanosis if the saturation is less than 85. So there is a narrow gap which can be found out with the help of pulse oximeter. So now we have acyanotic heart disease. We are going to discuss about the acyanotic heart disease. So what are the further classification of acyanotic heart disease? You have come to a kid who is suspected of having heart disease. You do pulse oximetry. The saturation is 100%. Now what? So we have various lesions, whether it's a left or right shunt or it's an obstructive lesion. So how will you come to know that the suspected child having acyanotic heart disease is left to right shunt or an obstructive lesion? So it will be decided by determining the pulmonary blood flow clinically. All these conditions, there is left to right shunt, and hence large amount of blood is going into the lungs. So because large amount of blood is going into the lungs, this child will have clinical features of increased pulmonary blood flow. But in this particular case, because the amount of blood reaching to the lung is normal, it is not more, and hence they will not have features of increased pulmonary blood flow. So based on history and chest X-ray, we will be able to determine whether the pulmonary blood flow is increased or normal. What are the clinical features of increased pulmonary blood flow? We discussed all these features in our first case scenario. If the child is having repeated episodes of chest infection, feeding difficulty, suck, rest, suck, cycles, sweating while feeding, hyperdynamic precordium, baseline tachycardia, tachypnea, subcostal retraction, mid-diastolic murmur at the apex, and the failure to thrive. Among all the features, the easiest feature from clinical would be the hyperdynamic precordium. Put your hand on the precordium. If the heart is beating very fast, then it means that the large volume of the blood is being ejected at a higher rate by the heart, and hence it is a hyperdynamic precordium. A hyperdynamic precordium is a feature of increased pulmonary blood flow. So what will be there if the patient is having a normal pulmonary blood flow? You will have a normal precordium. There will be no hyperdynamic precordium. There will be no history of repeated low tract infection. There will be no baseline tachycardia. There will be no failure to thrive. All stenotic lesions will grow healthily because the large volume of the blood is not required to be ejected. The volume overload is not there. There is only pressure overload. So heart has to work more when the heart has to eject large volume of the blood, and hence there will be failure to thrive. But in patients with obstructive lesion, these patients have only pressure overload, and that is counteracted by hypertrophy of the right ventricle and not by increased basal metabolic rate of the body. And hence, these patients will not have failure to thrive. Depending upon the type of obstructive lesion, the child will have heaving apex. The systolic murmur will be of higher category because obstructive lesions will have a more harsh murmur, and delayed component corresponding component second heart sound. Like if it's a pulmonary stenosis, then pulmonary component will be delayed. If it's aortic stenosis, aortic component will be delayed. Means second heart sound has two components, A2 and P2. If A2 is delayed, then A2 P2 will be narrowed down, or it will become a single second heart sound in case of aortic stenosis. In case of pulmonary stenosis, A2 followed by P2, P2 will be delayed, and hence A2 P2 will be widened up. So it will be wide splitting of the second heart sound in case of pulmonary stenosis. So delayed corresponding component of the second heart sound will be appreciated. So how will you decide on the pulmonary blood flow from the chest X-ray? If we look at the graphical presentation of the chest X-ray in this diagram, and we divide the lungs in the upper half and the lower half, what is the distribution of the arteries and the vein? In the upper half, the veins are located centrally and the arteries are located distally, laterally. But in the lower half, the arteries are located medially and the veins are located laterally. So if we see any vascular structure over here, it is artery. If we see any vascular structure over here, it is more likely to be vein. So when we have a patient of acute LVF, left ventricular failure, what we see? We see batwing appearance of acute pulmonary edema. And in that we see inverted mustache sign. Why we see inverted mustache sign? Because the pulmonary venous hypertension occur in those patients, and hence the pulmonary veins are concentrated medially in the upper half, and hence because of that we see inverted mustache sign or a batwing appearance of X-ray. Pulmonary veins are here. But when pulmonary arteries are dilated, what you will see? You will see that this particular area is opacified. So if you see a normal chest X-ray, the CT ratio is important. CT ratio of 0.5 is considered to be a normal CT ratio. Anything more than 0.5 is considered to be a cardiomegaly. What we can see, a small vascular structure over here. This small vascular structure is right pulmonary artery. Can everybody see my arrow? This vascular structure is a right pulmonary artery, and this vasculature we hardly see in the distal two-thirds of the lung field. So maximum vasculature we see in the hilum and the inner one-third of the lung fields. We have a normal size heart and the vasculature not exceeding inner one-third of the lung field is a normal pulmonary blood flow chest X-ray. But if you have cardiomegaly, dilated and prominent pulmonary arteries, and visible distal branches in the distal two-thirds of the lung field, it is called increased pulmonary blood flow X-ray. So in this particular X-ray, we can see that there is a huge cardiomegaly because some left-to-right shunt is causing dilatation either of the right side of the heart or the left side of the heart. In case of ASD, it will be the right heart which is dilated. In case of VSD, it is the left heart which is dilated. And this vascular structure, what we can see a horn-like structure, is a large dilated pulmonary artery. And we can see that the small vessels are going in the distal two-thirds of the lung field. So when you have a cardiomegaly, dilated right pulmonary artery, and the small vessels approaching the distal two-thirds of the lung field, these all features are suggestive of increased pulmonary blood flow. the left pulmonary artery cannot be seen in chest X-ray PA view because the left pulmonary artery goes posteriorly behind the left bronchus and hence it cannot be visualized in chest X-ray PA view. If you want to visualize the left pulmonary artery, either a lateral view or a slightly oblique LAO view of chest X-ray will show a dilated left pulmonary artery. But conventionally, we take only chest X-ray PA view, so we will not be able to see likewise what we can see over here will not be seen on the left side. So now we have a theory of a post-stenotic dilatation. So what is post-stenotic dilatation? When we have, what are the clinical features that we see on a obstructive lesion chest X-ray? We will see that the pulmonary blood flow is normal. There will be no dilatation of the pulmonary arteries. There will be no distal representation of the pulmonary vessels in the distal two-thirds of the lung field. But the posterior stenotic dilatation theory means that when you have a stenosis, distal to the stenosis immediately, there will be dilatation of the vessel because of the vascular circulating forces. More the narrow stenosis, more bigger the post-stenotic dilatation. So you can see over here, the stenosis is not significant in the last third figure. There is not much of the dilatation. More the stenosis, more the dilatation. So this dilatation can be appreciated on the chest X-ray when we are looking for obstructive lesion. So in this particular case, what we can see is this is the right pulmonary artery. We cannot hardly see any vascularity in the distal two-thirds of the lung fields. There is marginally or no cardiomegaly, but this main pulmonary artery is significantly dilated. So when you have a main pulmonary artery dilated, but no right pulmonary artery dilated, what you can see, the right pulmonary artery dilated over here. But here, the right pulmonary artery is not dilated. But still the main pulmonary artery is dilated with no plethora. So when you don't have a plethora with main pulmonary artery dilatation, then this dilatation is more likely because of post-pulmonary valve stenotic dilatation causing dilatation of the main pulmonary artery. Similarly, in this case, the heart size is near normal. The pulmonary vascularity is also normal. But we can see this bulging onto the right side. This is because the aortic wall is over here, and because of the jet hitting onto the lateral wall, the ascending aorta has dilated, and this dilated aorta is coming out of the left SVC. The left SVC normally forms the right SVC forms the right border of the heart, and just immediate to the left of the SVC there is ascending aorta. But because the ascending aorta has dilated, it will shift outside, forming the border of right border of the heart on the chest X-ray. So this is the aorta going like this, dilated aorta, and then this is the aortic knuckle. This is the left-sided aorta going down. This is the left, and this is the border of the descending aorta going down. In this particular case, there is no significant much cardiomegaly. The right pulmonary artery is seen normally, not much of the vascularity. But what we can see over here is a sign of 3. The upper 3 and the lower 3. This is the transverse arch, and here is the narrowest point of the coarctation, and again then post-stenotic dilatation, and then the descending aorta. So these are the subtle clues which you can look for if you are suspecting a coarctation of aorta. So a few exercises to identify So looking at the X-ray, you will be easily able to say that this child is having a cardiomegaly, the right pulmonary artery is dilated, and the pulmonary artery is reaching to the middle two-third and the distal two-third of the lung field. So it is increased pulmonary blood flow. Here also we have a cardiomegaly and the pulmonary artery is reaching distally. So this is a case of increased pulmonary blood flow. Huge cardiomegaly with significant increase in pulmonary blood flow. Here we have huge cardiomegaly and increased pulmonary blood flow. So there are a few examples which I wanted to show to emphasize that diagnosing increased pulmonary blood flow on chest X-ray is not difficult. So when you suspect a heart disease, get the X-ray done. If you have a cardiomegaly and increased pulmonary blood flow, you have any of the three of the diagnosis. So based on your physical examination, you came to a conclusion that there is no cyanosis. And based on history and chest X-ray, you decided that whether the pulmonary blood flow is increased or not. So when you have a baseline tachycardia, tachypnea, hyperdynamic precordium, recurrent infection history, cardiomegaly, increased pulmonary vascularity and chest X-ray, then you are most likely dealing with a left to right shunt, ASD, VSD, PDA, NE. And when you have no history of recurrent lower respiratory tract infection, absent failure to thrive, absence of hyperdynamic precordium, but on the contrary, you have a heaving precordium with few subtle signs on chest X-ray, then you are more likely dealing with an obstructive lesion. Still, differential diagnosis can be narrowed down. How? With the help of ECG. So how are you going to narrow down? With the help of ECG and your specific clinical findings. If all the three will have systolic murmur, I am not very good in identifying whether it is a ejection systolic or a pan systolic or a late ejection systolic. I don't know. I only know that it is a systolic murmur and it is a diastolic murmur. So when you have a systolic murmur with a wide fixed second heart sound and ECG showing right axis deviation with incomplete RBBB, then it is diagnostic of atrial septal defect. So when you have ejection systolic murmur or a pan systolic murmur with left heart dilatation on ECG, it is more likely ventricular septal defect. When you have a continuous murmur with left heart dilatation on ECG, it is more likely patent ductus arteriosus. So what are the features of ECG findings of right axis deviation and incomplete RBBB? Lead 1 and AVF. You can see that there is a deep S wave and an upright R wave. So they are reaching towards each other, which means that it is right axis deviation, and incomplete right bundle branch is suggested by R dash pattern, or what we call in simple terms M pattern. So when you see M pattern in lead V1 and right axis deviation with wide and fixed split and clinical features of increased pulmonary blood flow and X-ray finding of cardiomegaly, it is more likely ASD. Coming to VSD. VSD will have a normal axis because the normal axis is also towards the left and downwards. So it is going to have both R wave pointed upwards. Lead AVF and 1 both will be upwards. The important finding suggestive of left atrial and left ventricular dilatation is Q wave in V5, V6. Q wave is the small wave is a QRS. So when you have tall R wave in lead 5 and 6 and Q wave in 5 and 6, it is suggestive of left heart dilatation. But this particular X-ray, what we can see that the mid precordial leads have both tall R as well as deep S. It is suggestive of biventricular hypertrophy, what we call as Katz-Pachel phenomena, and that is suggestive of a very large VSD. Large VSD starts with left heart dilatation, and because there is also the pressure overload on the right ventricle, gradually the right ventricle also gets hypertrophied, and hence you will see equivocal forces, the R and S. Similarly, when we are suspecting an obstructive lesion, so how are you going to reach diagnosis of aortic stenosis, pulmonary stenosis? So when you have ejection systolic murmur, all the obstructive lesion will have ejection systolic murmur only. So based on that, we cannot do. Aortic stenosis murmur will be more prominent in aortic area, pulmonary stenosis murmur will be more prominent in the pulmonary area. But aortic stenosis murmur will be narrow, second heart sound, but pulmonary stenosis murmur will be wide because P2 will be late. In case A2 will be late, and hence it will come closer to P2. And in this case, ECG will be showing right ventricular hypertrophy. And in this particular case, ECG will be showing left ventricular hypertrophy. And one diagnostic finding is carotid thrill. Any patient, when you touch the carotid, if you hear a thrill, it is the diagnostic of aortic valvular stenosis. Subvalvular aortic stenosis is also acquired entity which occurs later on in case of hypertrophy HOCM patient. Those aortic stenosis will not have thrill because the aortic valve comes in between. Only the aortic valvular stenosis will have carotid thrill. So when you have a carotid thrill, when you touch over here and you start hearing thrill, thar, 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 it is the diagnostic. So you hear an ejection systolic murmur and you hear a thrill over here. It is the diagnostic of aortic stenosis. Similarly, coarctation of aorta, you hear some murmur on the precordium, but if you hear a murmur in the back, in the interscapular region, the intensity of the murmur will be more, then that will give a clue to the possibility of coarctation of aorta. So in case of pulmonary stenosis, you will see a tall R wave in lead V1. If tall R wave is a monophasic R wave, there is no S wave, it means that the pulmonary stenosis is severe form. In case of aortic stenosis, there will be deep S wave in V1 and tall R wave in lead V6. So that is also suggestive of left ventricular hypertrophy. So now, how are you going to clinically assess the severity of the shunt? Now I told you it's a ASD. Now I told you it's a VSD. So whether that ASD, VSD is large, moderate or small, how are you going to make up clinically? So there is a simple rule applied to all the three, ASD, VSD or PDA. If the precordium is normal, not hyperdynamic, there is no cardiomegaly, and the second component P2 is normal, it means the shunt is not significant size, it is not causing volume overload, and hence it will have near normal size chest X-ray, no cardiomegaly, no pulmonary vascularity increase, and a normal P2. In moderate shunt, you will have all features of hyperdynamic precordium cardiomegaly, but the second heart sound will not be very loud. It may be loud, but it will be less than P2. P2 less than A2. In case of large shunt, you will have cardiomegaly, hyperdynamic precordium, and P2 will be loud and banging, even louder than A2. So in general, when you don't have cardiomegaly, it's a small shunt. So when you have a cardiomegaly with loud P2, it is a large shunt. Normal P2 or a slightly loud P2 would be a moderate shunt. Similarly, for an obstructive lesion, the severity can be decided by the length of the murmur, the late peaking of the murmur, grade of the murmur, and ECG changes. ECG changes we have already discussed. Tall R wave in lead V1 is suggestive of severity of pulmonary stenosis. Grade of the murmur. Grade 3 murmur, mild stenosis. Grade 4 murmur, severe stenosis. Thrill, severe stenosis. Late peaking of the murmur with large volume of the blood needs to be ejected and hence it is a severe stenosis. And large amount of volume, it takes a longer duration for the murmur, it means a severe stenosis. So now we get the echo done and comes to the diagnosis. We have an echo report in our hand. So what are we going to do? Do you want to subject the child to surgery, medical treatment, interventions? What can be done? So there is a very limited scope of medical management in patients with congenital heart disease. There are only 3 medicines that we start in patients with acyanotic heart disease. One of them is furopate, furosemide, another one is enalapril, and the third one is digoxin. Any patients who are having signs of congestive cardiac failure will need all these medications. But there is important decision to be made when we have an echo report in our hand saying ASD, VSD. But should we start this medicine in that patient or not, because the child is not having clinical CCF? So when clinically child is not in CCF, when should we start all these 3 medications? There are only 2 indications. If the child is having clinical features of increased pulmonary blood flow with severe pulmonary hypertension, means baseline tachycardia, tachypnea, subcostal retraction, hyperdynamic precordium, and echo showing severe PAH. When this is there, you should start this medicine. If there is no PAH, still you have to start medicine if there are significant features of baseline tachycardia, tachypnea, retraction, and failure to thrive. So sometimes even in absence of pulmonary hypertension, there is significant amount of volume overload where you need to start these medications. So these are the only 2 indications where we need to start. Not all the patients with diagnosis of ASD, VSD, PDA need to be started on these medications. So now, what to do? If you have a diagnosis of ASD, VSD, PDA, whether we need to close it or not. If we need to close it, when should we close? And how should we close? The answer to all these 3 questions can be given by deciding the size of the lesion, the location of the lesion, the age of the child, and the symptomatic status of the child. So coming to ASD, the most of the children are asymptomatic active. It is basically the accidental detection of the murmur in OPD or a school health program where you hear a murmur, get the echo done and come to find that this is the case. So usually these patients are asymptomatic. Very rarely, less than 5% of patients present with congestive cardiac failure in first year of life. More than 95% of the patients remain asymptomatic. It is irrespective of the size of the defect. Even 25 mm ASD in a 1-year-old child will be asymptomatic because it's a low pressure circuit. ASD less than 8 millimeters not associated with the RV volume overload are likely to close spontaneously. So we do not treat ASD which are less than 8 millimeters of size measured on echocardiography. Any defect which is larger than 8 millimeter and causing cardiomegaly needs to be closed. If you don't close them, what will happen? It is likely to go into pulmonary hypertension isomerization at 20 to 30 years, that is second and third decade of life. And also there is a risk of arrhythmias in the laterhood if you don't operate timely. So the ideal age of ASD closure is 2 to 4 years, that is preschool. If ASD is timely treated, it gives a normal life expectancy. There is no decrease in the life expectancy. So PDA in term babies, any PDA in term, if does not close in 2 to 3 months of life, then it will never close spontaneously. Large PDA needs closure in 3 to 6 months of age, moderate PDA 6 to 12 months of age, and small PDA can be closed at 1 to 2 years of age. Now, this is very important slide, which VSD closes spontaneously. So we have a report showing that there is Falana Gymkhana VSD. So what should we guide to the parents? Whether this VSD will close or not, whether you need surgery, okay, रुक जाओ अभी कुछ नहीं करना है, क्या करेंगे? So the answer can be given in two ways. One is the size of the VSD and the other is the location of the VSD. Small VSD, where you have no cardiomegaly, no features of increased pulmonary blood flow, more than 99% of the cases, the VSD is going to close spontaneously in 3 to 5 years of age. Even with moderate VSD, where you might have some features of increased pulmonary blood flow, but there is no pulmonary hypertension, those patients can survive, they can wait, because when the pulmonary pressures are normal, there is no urgency of surgery, you wait, and more than 85% of the cases will close spontaneously. As there is no pulmonary hypertension, there is no risk of Eisenmengerization, so you can wait in patients with moderate VSD. Large VSD, there is severe pulmonary hypertension, they are less likely to be restrictive, and you need to treat them early. If you don't treat them early, either they go in CCF or they go in Eisenmengerization. So depending upon the size of the VSD, small, moderate, and large VSD are less likely to close spontaneously. Coming to the location of the VSD, the perimembranous VSD and the muscular VSD are the two likely VSD which are going to close spontaneously, whereas the outlet VSD more towards the pulmonary valve, the inlet VSD towards the mitral and the tricuspid valve, the Malline VSD, Swiss cheese VSD. These are the fewer VSDs which will never close spontaneously. The timing of VSD closure, large VSD needs closure at 3 to 6 months of age, depending upon the symptoms. If the child is more symptomatic, you might need to close at 2 to 3 months of age also. And if child is asymptomatic, little bit gaining weight, well, you can go for closure at 4 months, 5 months, 6 months also. Moderate VSD needs closure at 1 to 2 years of age, depending upon the symptom. You are waiting, but the child is not gaining weight, then you need to close moderate VSD. But if the moderate VSD is asymptomatic, 85% of closes spontaneously. Asymptomatic small VSD, where there is no cardiomegaly, can be followed lifelong, but with caution for infective endocarditis and newly developing aortic regurgitation murmur, because sometimes small VSDs can engulf the aortic valve, which is very near to the VSD. Now, in case of pulmonary stenosis, if the neonatal pulmonary stenosis, it is usually RV dysfunction which is there, so you need to balloon dilate immediately. But in case of bigger children, if the RV dysfunction is there, you need to do early intervention. But if RV function is normal, then depending upon the gradients, if the gradient is more than 60 degrees, 60 millimeters of mercury, you need to balloon dilate it. There is no age criteria when to do. But if ventricular dysfunction is there, even in neonatal age, irrespective of age, you need to open up. Similarly, in case of aortic stenosis causing left ventricular dysfunction, you need to open up even in the neonates with the help of balloon dilatation. But if it's older children and the LV function is good, based on few characteristic criteria of the peak gradient of 80 and mean gradient of 50, you can go for balloon dilatation of the aortic valve. Similarly, in case of coarctation, depending upon the age of the presentation, neonatal coarcts needs to be treated immediately because there is a risk of severe LV dysfunction and death. In case of older people, we need to intervene depending upon the symptoms. So if there is LV dysfunction or CCF or upper limb hypertension, we need to intervene. If the LV function is normal, there is no CCF, and there is mild hypertension, you can follow up and do it later age after 6 months of age. If there is no hypertension, no heart failure, and normal ventricular function, then you can open up even at the later age. There is no hurry. When you make a diagnosis of coarctation in a newborn, it doesn't mean that you have to rush and put the patient in the operation theater. So depending upon the clinical status of the patient, whether the LV function is normal or whether there is significant hypertension, you have to decide whether you need an immediate intervention or these kits can be done later on. The modality can be in the form of balloon dilatation or surgical opening. Less than 6 months of age, surgery is preferred over balloon dilatation because the risk of recurrence is very high in balloon dilatation of coarctation in first few months of life. After 6 months of age, balloon dilatation is the modality of choice. Less than 6 months of age, surgical repair should be done. If the kids are more than 10 years of age, then balloon dilatation with stenting can also be done. So now we will have now few exercises, then I will stop. Then you can ask me the questions if you have any. So this is a 2-year-old child with recurrent wheezing and borderline weight gain treated as asthma. And there is suspicion of soft systolic murmur, no cyanosis clubbing, mild hyperdynamic precordium. This is a chest X-ray. Mohit sir, I would like to unmute all the participants if they are really keen on answering the questions.
So this is for anybody, like all the fellows and resident, they can
This is
unmute.
for fellows, yes, for fellows and resident.
Yeah, they
See,
can
this is
unmute
all
and they
what
can
we have learned.
answer.
This is basically post-class exercise. See, we have discussed out all the aspects of acyanotic heart disease. So now I want any of the fellow who can give me answer that whether it is a acyanotic heart disease among acyanotic, whether there is pulmonary blood flow increased or not, and based on characteristic ECG finding, what is the lesion? So you have a borderline weight gain, hyperdynamic precordium, the X-ray showing cardiomegaly, dilated pulmonary arteries, main pulmonary artery plethora, and ECG showing right axis deviation with M pattern in V1. So what is the possible diagnosis? Anybody would voluntarily would like to answer the question?
Residents and fellows, please answer. This case has already been very well explained by Dr. Ritesh. Or if you are, you should speak up instead of writing into the chat box. Or you can write in the chat box if you want. But best is if you speak up. So Parth has written is VSD.
VSD.
Yeah, Parth has written VSD.
Okay. So now let us come back. So we have a 2-year-old child, borderline weight gain. We have a soft systolic murmur, the hyperdynamic precordium. We have a cardiomegaly. So we are dealing with a 2-year-old child who is having features of increased pulmonary blood flow. Everybody agree that we are dealing with an acyanotic heart disease in which there is increase in the pulmonary blood flow. So the condition is more likely to be left to right shunt. So now looking at the ECG. ECG, you have right axis deviation and bundle branch block. So right axis deviation bundle branch block happens in ASD or VSD?
Yes,
Basically,
residents and fellows. Anyone, if you are shy
as I have
of
explained, that ASD will cause right heart dilatation and VSD will cause left heart dilatation. So when you have VSD, you will see deep Q wave and tall R wave in lead V5, V6. And here we are seeing RS pattern with right axis deviation, which is suggestive of atrial septal defect. So coming to the next case, a 2-month-old child, asymptomatic, acyanotic, grade 3/4 systolic murmur, precordium is normal, there is no cardiomegaly, and ECG is also normal, but there is grade 4/6 murmur. So what is the probably diagnosis?
So people can speak or type in the chat box, whatever is their preferences. It's better if you unmute and speak. Anyone? No, nobody has written anything. Nobody is speaking anything. Eva.
See, there is no cardiomegaly. There is no cardiomegaly. There are no features of increased pulmonary blood flow. And ECG is also normal. So we are dealing with a very small shunt. So we are dealing with a very small shunt where there will be no X-ray finding, there will be no ECG finding, and there will be just a murmur, which will be the only finding in the patient. So it is likely to be a small VSD. Instead, if instead of grade 4 murmur, if it have been a grade 3 murmur, then it would have more likely to be ASD, and continuous murmur would have been PDA. So when you have a normal chest X-ray and ECG and you have a murmur, it means there is acyanotic heart disease with a very small shunt, not amenable to cause significant volume overload and no cardiomegaly. Now, in this particular case, case 5, a 3-month-old child, failure to thrive, precordium hyperdynamic, grade 3/6 systolic murmur, P2 loud. P2 loud means pulmonary hypertension. Hyperdynamic precordium, failure to thrive means increased pulmonary blood flow, and deep Q wave and tall R wave in V5, V6 means LA, LV dilatation. X-ray suggestive of cardiomegaly with increased pulmonary vascularity. So we have a very common diagnosis of large VSD.
Yeah, people have written VSD.
Yes. So now you have a 12-year-old boy, history of fall and unconsciousness while playing in the school, rushed to the pediatrician, heart rate 110, blood pressure is 140/90, precordial heave. Looking at the X-ray, anybody would like to give a diagnosis? There is no cardiomegaly, there is no pulmonary plethora, the pulmonary artery is very thin, the main pulmonary artery is also very thin.
Rajiv sir has written. Okay, Tushar has written coarctation of aorta.
Correct, correct. So what we can see over here is sign of 3. This is a post-stenotic dilatation of the. So if you look at this X-ray generally, you will see it's a normal X-ray, kuch nahi hai. But if you correlate with the history and the blood pressure findings, you will be able to diagnose that it is more likely a coarctation of aorta. So hyperdynamic precordium, baseline tachycardia, tachypnea, recurrent lower respiratory infection are features of increased pulmonary blood flow. On chest X-ray, cardiomegaly, dilated pulmonary arteries, increased vascularity is suggestive of increased pulmonary blood flow. X-ray and ECG is an important bedside tool and gives insight to the differential diagnosis and should be done in every patient when you suspect heart disease. And Rajiv sir, I have given answer to your question which you have asked in the chat. Because we feel that echo is very easily accessible and we can do it easily and we cannot read ECG, let us straight away go for echocardiography. But if you clinically go by this exercise, then in more than 95% of the cases, you will be able to diagnose it correctly before going for echocardiography. There is no need to diagnose type of murmur. It is just you diagnose whether it's a systolic murmur or diastolic murmur, that is more than enough. And diastolic murmur is nowhere required. You just diagnose it's a systolic murmur and you try to differentiate based on whether the pulmonary blood flow is increased or decreased. You will be able to have some clue whether it's an obstructive lesion or an increased pulmonary blood flow lesion. And later on, based on the X-ray and ECG, you can still further titrate to a narrow differential diagnosis. Thank you so much. Anybody would like to ask any of the questions? They can write on the chat group also.
Thank you, Dr. Ritesh. It was wonderful. Like I would must say this is if somebody has attended the whole thing, so without doing an echo, they can come to the diagnosis. You know, you can just thread down the diagnosis just by doing an X-ray and ECG. Thank you very much. I would like to have comment from Nirmal sir is there, Rajiv sir is there. रितेश भाई आप अपना खाली ना ये शेयरिंग बंद कर दीजिए थोड़ा सा.
Yeah, Ritesh. I think Ritesh is right that for learning and teaching, doing ECG and chest X-ray are important. Definitely makes to see, but modern medicine